Hello, everyone. My name is Jasmine Kui, and I'm the Education and Industry Programmer at the Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival. Welcome to CBC Digital Spaces, our third panel in the Real Ideas Symposium on World Building. I would first like to begin by locating Real Asians offices on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat nations. This territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a treaty of collective responsibility for the protection and sharing of land and resources. The offices of our festival streaming platforms are located respectively on Takaranto in Dish with One Spoon territory, and also on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh on the west coast. In the space of a digital symposium, I want to recognize the way development has historically been used to steal land and displace people, and how technology in very material forms is wielded to suppress, surveil, and inflict violence on Indigenous communities. In light of this, we would hope to take up critical conversations on digital tools and digital spaces to interrogate the liberatory promises of digital futures. We encourage audiences everywhere to learn and remember the histories of the lands they are settled on. As we begin this panel, hosted in partnership with the CBC, a federal crown corp, we hope this relationship continues to hold media structures in this country accountable to more nuanced and intentional practices of storytelling and representation, both on and behind the screen. Here on Turtle Island, we recognize the numerous treaty lands, agreements, and the unceded territories, and also the ongoing work of Indigenous leaders and communities fighting for reparations and justice. We honor the work and follow the lead of Indigenous organizers, creatives, and communities that continue to give us hope, language, and possibility. For today's panel, we would like to thank the Canada Council for the Arts Digital Strategy Fund, and Ontario Creates for their support of the symposium, and of course to CBC for partnering with us. Just a reminder that if you're watching live from Cinesen and want to ask us questions, to send it through the chat or the Ask a Question box. And Cinesen is our watch portal that you're viewing all of the streaming from. If you are viewing from a phone, the chat will be at the bottom of the screen. I will now cede the rest of the time to the amazing Anita Lee, who will be introducing the rest of our panelists today. So, Anita.
Thanks, Jasmine. Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome. So thanks for attending the CBC Digital Spaces panel. My name is Anita Lee, and I'll be your moderator for the next hour and a half. So today we're going to be talking about new opportunities and methods for pitching digital content to CBC. And specifically, this panel will be focusing on CBC's Creator Network, and CBC GEM's YA Digital Originals stream. And we're also going to cover information on what executives are looking for when it comes to creative, production considerations, submission details, and how to navigate working with the CBC in general. So, as I said, my name is Anita Lee. I'm a longtime journalist and media consultant based in Toronto. I also recently launched a newsletter called The Other Wave, which is all about challenging the status quo in Canadian journalism. And I'm here with my three illustrious panelists, Rignam Wangkang, who's the producer of CBC Creator Network, Zach Feldberg, who's a programmer for CBC Digital Originals, and Yute Lee, who's a filmmaker and host of the YouTube channel About Here. So welcome, Rignam, Zach, and Yute.
Thanks, Anita.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay, awesome. I would love if to kick off this conversation, if the three of you could just go around really quickly and just give a bit more context about your background and the work you do. So let's start with Rignam. Oh, Rignam, you're muted.
That's the most memorable line of 2020. That's for sure.
The longer of 2020.
I'm a producer with the Creator Network. We actively discover and develop emerging content creators, digital content creators, and independent filmmakers from across the country. We have producers in Toronto, Vancouver, Halifax, and Winnipeg. And, we started as a means to make the CBC more relevant in a digital age and for younger audiences.
That's perfect. Thank you, Rignam. Let's go to Zach next.
Great. Thanks, Anita. So my name's Zach Feldberg. I oversee the CBC YA Digital Originals team and strategy. And maybe a very brief history lesson on where our team came from and how we got here. So my role and team predates CBC Gem, which is our streaming service. And when we started, and it was just called Digital Originals about 5 years ago, we were thinking about the team being responsible for quote unquote digital content on any platform that wasn't CBC television. So Facebook, YouTube, there was a CBC TV app. So a lot of our programming went there too, but it was really like, just kind of like spray all of these platforms, see where it does best, reach an audience. So it's become a lot more intentional and focused. And as part of that, and I think with Gem launching, we really had to define what our strategy was from an audience standpoint. So in the past year or so, we've really pivoted to a more audience-focused strategy, which is why we added YA to it, because it really is about, and this dovetails perfectly with what Rignam said, it really is about reaching a younger audience that isn't engaging with CBC in any other way. And, it's also an older audience than CBC Kids. So it represents a gap in our offering that ultimately it's like 13 to 24, but we don't paint with that wide a brush. There are obviously a lot of different segments within that demo. And we think about programming of all kinds that would be appropriate for that audience. So that's the capsule version of what our team does. And we'll get much more into that this afternoon.
Yeah, thanks so much, Zach. That was really comprehensive.
Great.
And last but not least, Ute.
Thanks, Anita. So I feel like I have a more complicated description of what I do than Rignam or Zach. It's not as well defined, but I essentially create videos on issues concerning our cities, whether that's public transit to housing to the environment and how our cities sort of interplay with those many different factors. And for the last year and a half, I guess, I've been partnering with the CBC as part of the Creator Network with people such as Rignam to bring some of this content to a wider audience through CBC's reach.
Okay, thank you so much, Ute. So everybody who's attending the panel, y'all are really lucky because Rignam and Zach are both, seasoned producers at the CBC, but you're also getting a perspective from Ute as a content creator. So we really wanted to paint a really holistic picture about how the process or the submission process works with CBC. So to kick off the conversation, I want to start with Ute. So as a content creator, tell us the story of how you got into the CBC ecosystem. And I understand you first connected with Rignam. So can you just walk us through that journey?
For sure. And I was thinking about this, and I pulled up the first email that Rignam ever sent me for the memories, the nostalgia. I am sorry to report that there's nothing like super spicy in it or nothing, crazy. But,
That's amazing.
I know, right? I got to have some facts and evidence here. But I'll tell you, like, the first thing, and what I really appreciate, someone like Rignam for is it was Rignam who reached out to me. It was, I'd been making videos by myself on my own personal YouTube account for this particular YouTube account for maybe about 6 months. And these were videos on Vancouver urban planning issues about the SkyTrain extension to like highway infrastructure upgrades. And for some reason, some producer out in Toronto, thought that they were interesting enough to reach out to me and set up a phone call. And from that phone call, we talked about what it would look like for a collaboration with CBC. If there was any interest on my end to work with them a little bit more closely and to kind of learn that ecosystem a bit better. And I then was connected to a local producer here in Vancouver. Her name's Sheila Peacock. And, that was the beginnings of what I think, what I really consider to be such a pivotal relationship in my life, one that's taught me a lot kind of professionally, this videography industry. For full disclosure, my background is I've never gone to film school or anything like that. My degree is in urban planning, so I'm a bit more of a policy wonk than I am like like a Premiere Pro geek or anything like that. For someone like myself, this relationship with CBC has really been helpful in learning sort of some of just like the logistics that you wouldn't really consider when thinking about how a polished video piece comes together. I think I went a little bit beyond this beginning point and instead gave you the whole story, but that's kind of how I remember it happening. I don't know, Rignan, would you like to fact check me or?
No, that's perfect, Ute. You
Yeah.
laid the groundwork really nicely, and so I'm gonna take it to Rignum and ask you, how did you come across Ute, and what's your approach for finding new content creators for CBC?
Yeah, sure. So I found Ute on Reddit. That's the story. And it was pretty funny. I was just browsing Reddit as I usually do, and also just Googling stuff. And this channel About Here came across one of the feeds, and I looked into it. At the time, he had about 2,000 subscribers, I think, Ute. And he had like 2 or 3 videos, maybe. One of them that really I liked was the Chinatown one, right? That was he had a great video about Chinatown in Vancouver and how it's divided and how it's changing. And that's how I found him, and the rest is kind of history. I mean, I can explain a little bit more about what happened. I emailed him, I called him, and then we got to talking. As he said, I introduced him to Sheila, and then Sheila is our producer for the Creator Network in Vancouver, and she got him, I don't know how many videos off the bat, whether it was 1 or 7.
I think we started with 2, and then we went right up to 6 more after that.
Yeah, so we started off with 2, and the first one was right off the bat so different and fresh, and did really well on YouTube, and just gained this huge audience. And then from there, Ute is very humble, so he didn't talk about how, it's really opened up his doors and our doors in terms of getting his digital videos onto CBC Vancouver News. He's become a regular radio columnist at CBC Vancouver. And he writes for CBC Vancouver too for his articles. So it's really been the whole package. And then in terms of how we find creators, that's just one way, is me just finding on YouTube or randomly searching. Obviously, that's not the best way. A lot of it is referrals through friends and employees. Zach will get into it, but we talk as well. We pass notes. We have software that we use to search creators. And then we do a lot of like not open calls, but targeted calls towards organizations. We do information sessions with youth groups and creative organizations across the country. And just kind of always keeping our eyes and ears open. And obviously we're watching a lot of content online too, so.
Okay, that's good. And it sounds like the Creators Network work, like you said, is a pipeline to cool, because now you your team, but also like he's on CBC Radio, so that's really good opportunities right there. You also mentioned that you worked with Zach. So Zach, can you speak a little bit on to that? Zach.
Thank you. That's going to take me a minute. I was just saying our team is in a unique position in that, the shows that we commission for YA digital originals live on Gem, most of them. And they live alongside all of the TV shows that are sort of filtered through the main sort of CBC network unit. So they live alongside those shows, and some of the shows that are part of our slate are produced by the same companies or companies at the same scale as the ones that, would be producing, the TV titles. But then others are, from more emerging creators or, creators who we think are sort of part of this sort of next wave, either at the writing level, the producing level, or the directing level, or all of the above. So, I think there are a lot of opportunities, perhaps uniquely so, to surface new talent and to have, Creator Network introduce talent to us that, we think should be at least entered into a development phase of some kind for, maybe a batch of scripts or maybe a few short pieces of filmed content or whatever the case may be. So, we view the relationship between our team and, Rignum's team and Creator Network as really invaluable, as just a way to discover new talent. And we really can spare no effort or expense at trying to find new talent. And I think, it's through panels like this, sure, and through all the work that Rignum just described, but it's kind of a never-ending thing. And it's a huge part of the job is how do we create as open an atmosphere as possible and just be accessible, but also get the word out about if you're interested in pitching to CBC, which door should you knock on? How can you pitch successfully? And we can talk a little bit more about some guidelines and tips a little bit later, I think. But I think having a resource like Creator Network and being able to start there and then have someone like Rignum sort of hold your hand a little bit and just sort of show you where to go next, I think is incredibly helpful. And it is a two-way street. So if someone were to come to us and for whatever reason it felt like you should really start with Creator Network, that's the place that your ideas will come to life for whatever reason. Maybe there's an editorial reason or some other sort of reason that we would say this is where it belongs. We could go that way, and then vice versa. If someone were to come to Creator Network, but that team thinks, oh, this should actually be with the YA team, we'd expect to hear from them too. So it's a really nice sort of two-way dialogue.
Okay, great. Thanks, Zach. And I apologize to our audience members. I had slight technical difficulties, so if I just kind of zipped into the ether of the internet and back again, that's why. But we can continue our conversation from here. So thank you for all three of you for sharing that journey. I want to get a little more concrete and a little more specific with my questions now for the benefit of the audience. So I want folks... So let's start with the basics. So how should content creators pitch the CBC? And what does a good pitch look like? So Rignum and Zach, I'd love if you could share a few tips to start.
Yeah, I guess I'll start and then go pass it over to Zach because it kind of builds onto it. For us, we don't require much because our content is in the short form digital realm. We don't require a massive pitch deck, although sometimes people do send that to us. We really only need something bare bones in terms of, because we're trying to commission series now as opposed to one-off videos. So a series title, a log line, which is kind of like a catchy thesis statement or focus statement about what the series is about. And then episode titles, episode summaries, like a paragraph each. And, links to some of your work that you've done in the past. And then if this is going to be a hosted series or if there's going to be people on camera, we would like to see like a 20 to 30 second clip of them and how they speak to a camera. So that's really the bare necessities of what we're looking for in a pitch. And some people sometimes send us less, some people send us more, but we try to narrow everything down into one focused page, if even a page.
Okay, so keep it succinct and keep it tight. Zach?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that our process is too much different. I mean, I think one thing we appreciate is that nobody can really see what we have in development because for the most part, we don't announce it. So, if you're producing and you have this idea and you want to bring it to CBC, you wouldn't necessarily know whether or not we had something that was along those lines. And if you are coming up with something specifically for CBC, it would be a shame if you went really far down the road only to find out like there's something really close to this territory that we have in development. Therefore, it's probably not something we can work together on. So I would say, I think in spirit, a lot of the stuff that Rignum said is true for us too. We want to connect with the vision that you have for this idea. We want to understand that there's an audience for it and see that you're passionate about connecting with that audience. And then we want to see that it aligns with the objectives that we have for our YA slate, which again, I'll send a link around so that people can see the guidelines that we have posted. But that's ultimately what it comes down to. And I think a one-pager is a fine place to start to get that vision across. there are cases where we have received filmed content, like a demo or a short pilot. It's certainly not necessary, but there are a few examples where it's been really, really helpful. And, I think there are some recent examples. I think we'll get into specific examples in a bit, but that I can think of where it's not that it wouldn't have jumped off the page on a script, but I can say for sure that having filmed content of specific actors in these specific scenes, and really just conveying the sensibility really helped us as programmers understand what they would be going for and how the voice was so unique. So not always necessary, and if you can convey that message and that vision on the page, so much the better. But as you're pitching it might be worth considering, like, what else can I put forward that would really help these people get excited, so that we can move into development or eventually production. So no two are alike. It's really, I think about a room full of strangers reading your material, and how are you going to get them excited about it? And we will read and watch everything you send us. So it is, a bit almost like a gut check, as you're submitting something, like, is this enough? Is it, does it encapsulate the idea? Is it exciting to read? And then go from there. And then it's a dialogue. It's an ongoing conversation between you as the person pitching this and other ideas, and then us as programmers. And we all just want to find a way to work together. So it's the beginning of a hopefully long relationship.
Okay, great. And I just have a quick follow-up question to you, Zach and Rignum, about this. Can you speak to, are you the final decision makers, or are you the first kind of first barrier, so to speak, or first group of people that the pitch has to pass through?
So I'll just speak to my area first. So my team is, so there's 3 other people on the team. So there's Paige Murray, Melanie Fan, and Carmen Chung. And then we're part of the scripted team, which is run by Trish Williams. So, I think nothing that we do is a solo decision. It's all very collaborative and, very much a discussion. We have weekly submissions meetings where we talk about everything and, just try to keep each other honest. And it's just, if we, move ahead into development on this, where do we think it will land? And do we think that it will reach an audience? Is it complementary to the programs that we're already doing? Mm-hmm. Does it add something new to that sort of editorial vision that we have? And ultimately, is GEM the right home for it? And I think those are all the things we ask ourselves constantly. And it's just an ongoing conversation. So that's a glimpse into it. We all sort of have a voice at that table. And then ultimately it's about sort of, financing and how are we going to help get this thing made? And that's step 2. It starts with the creative, but that's a sort of a mini window into how the decisions get made.
Okay. Sounds like collaborative and consensus group decision-making.
Yeah.
Okay. And Rignum?
Yeah. I would say ours is pretty similar. The barriers for entry for us are a lot lower just because our videos are shorter. It's not a full GEM web series. It's not a TV show, which has to go, it takes years to even get through the door. And they, only commission maybe 1 or 2 a year. We're always looking for content and creators, and we're commissioning all the time. And it's quite a rapid process for us. So I have a boss, Lise Hussein, who's the head of the Creator Network. She has green light power for smaller videos, but then also for larger productions, we have to go to our director, Chris Harris, who's the head of digital. But we all talk all the time. We have meetings all the time, just like Zach's team, and are always discussing. And I do want to go back to the other question, just to give a little bit more detail in terms of pitches. We have an editorial lane that's pretty clear. I can send a link, but we have 4 categories that we commission under. We just repivoted as a brand for Creator Network because we weren't always public facing, and we're trying to position ourselves. We are looking for videos that go under the lanes of surviving student life, owning our identities, changing the system, and starting up. And so any videos that fall under those 4 categories really fit like the voice that we're trying to give, and the voice that we're trying to give youths 18 to 24, sometimes up to 30. and we're just trying to target, young people who are, living this weird world that we're in, and how to navigate it, and how to succeed, or how to live in a post-COVID world, or even in a COVID world. And as Zach was saying, for us, we don't need to see a demo. Like, we don't want to give creators work that they're not being paid for. That's the big thing. So just try to just send us a little bit of an idea of what you want, and then we can kind of discuss if we like. But it does help us to get some sort of visuals as to what the work is, and then go from there.
Okay, great. Yeah, those 4 lanes or streams you mentioned sound really exciting. So everybody make note of that, and tailor your pitches to that. So I want to return back to you, Tay, and ask you, can you walk us through some of your successful pitches to the CBC, as well as ones that may not be so successful, and just kind of walk through like what those look like specifically?
Totally. Yeah. I was furiously writing down from listening to Zach and Rick just now on, how I can make sure my next pitches get approved. So, I mean, a lot of the things I'm going to say are going to sound quite cliche, I think, but some of these cliche things, I think they really do stand always. One of the biggest things I find when pitching, maybe universally even, is finding a story that is again, cliche. It's unique, right? One that's unique. And so the pitches that I've made that have always failed are the ones that there's so much discussion about it already. Like, there are hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of content about the housing crisis. Maybe not millions, but there's a lot of content about the housing crisis. So anytime I've pitched something about housing, it's like, are you sure you have like a unique take on this issue? Is very, very important, right? A pitch that was very successful that I did was one on, there's a bridge in Vancouver called the Lionsgate Bridge, and it turns out it has a problem right now. The biggest cruise ships in the world can't fit under it, and the tourism industry in Vancouver is freaking out about it. Okay, that's a unique pitch, and that one went through. Sheila loved it, and the video did quite well. And I think, so like, if that gives you sort of an idea of, a pitch that could be perceived as unique, I think that's there's one example. Another factor I really try to stress is that I think it's important for your producers to see that it's you that should be the person telling the story and not anybody else. Whether it's that you're personally associated or related to this story, right? Like if it's like a personal thing that happened to you, or a family member, or a friend, or you have some of the sort of know-how, the education, the experience to speak on it. So one thing I found quite advantageous for me over the years is my background in urban planning. I'm someone that has studied and worked in professionally in this field that I'm now creating content about. So when I want to make a video about transit, I'm very confident that there aren't that many people out there that are both like really geeky about public transit and also happen to make videos. So like I think it's really good to, again, like position why you're the person that should be telling the story. And yeah, I think with that in mind, and then ultimately, I think to echo what Rignam was saying, it's really good to know, to have a conversation. I think even before you start bombarding people with pitches, like what is the producer you're working with? What are they looking for? What is some of the content that they already have in the works? And what are some of the gaps maybe that they see in their programming? Because ultimately at the end of the day, it's a collaboration, and you're working for a client who has their own sort of needs and wants in production.
Okay, thanks so much, Ute. So it sounds like tap into your unique lived experience and own it, but also make sure that you do your research and have a bit of a conversation with the producers to get a sense of the gaps you can fill.
Yeah, I would also say just for us at least, do a quick YouTube search and see if there's already videos on there that have been done on this. And also, while we would prefer that you do have that unique take and you have that background in that area that you're pitching or wanting to do a series on, you could also approach it in a way where you're curious about this scene or community or subject and you want to learn more about it, and so you're learning about it with the viewers in the video. So that's another angle.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's actually a really good segue into my next question for Regnum and Zach. Can you describe some recent standout pitches that you both have received and tell us why they stood out from the rest? So maybe I'll go to Zach first.
Sure. And I would start by completely agreeing with what Rignum said, is that, it doesn't have to be your own personal lived experience, and that we've seen amazing pitches that are more exploratory and sort of, someone from outside of something, whether be it an identity or just an area of interest that they then explore. But as far as giving examples goes, there are a couple that come to mind immediately that I did want to share, just because, and they are a little bit more about that sort of lived experience approach, but they were really good pitches, and I think they're worth sharing here. So one is a series called Next Stop, which is actually on Gem now, but was originally released on YouTube. And it was brought to us by Jabari Weeks and Tishona Tapambwa and Phil Whitmer. And they had created this world about a group of Afro-Caribbean, Zimbabwe Canadian friends, like just living in Toronto with, like, you've seen a lot of Toronto content, but you've never really seen this kind of Toronto content. It was something that spoke to sort of a perspective on the culture that we'd absolutely never seen before. And we're just like, well, this is, and again, it kind of goes back to, like, do you need to see it? You don't need to see it. And I'm sure the scripts were probably brilliant before they went and shot them on their own, but it really helped to just see the performances and just the naturalistic and very funny and very charming work that they had already done. So that was memorable because it was one of those no-brainers. It was just like, well, we obviously have to work together, and really happy to see that up on Gem now. So that is one good example where the work really spoke for itself. Another where, I was going to say nothing had been filmed, but they did shoot a trailer, but for funding purposes. But the show, The 410, that Supinder Rach and Mad Ruck brought to us, I can't even remember years anymore, maybe 2017. It was a few years ago. But another one where, we knew that we were in good hands as far as, Supinder telling this story about a very specific Punjabi Canadian community in Brampton, a family drama, a crime drama, and also just, again, a very specific, perspective on a world that we also knew we hadn't seen depicted on screen before. And those are things that we gravitate to. It's wanting to be able to help bring those stories and identities to screen in a way that we know will connect with this audience that we're trying to reach. And it's a very fussy audience because they have an unbelievable amount of choice. And it's just that weight is something we feel constantly, and just think, how can we keep creating opportunities for stories to live and thrive on a place like Gem, so that over time that audience will accumulate on our service. So those are a couple examples. I mean, another one, if I can give one more, it's slightly different, but it's a doc series, and it's a comedy doc series, which, I think that's the kind of thing that, if you were a producer of a comedy doc series, it might be hard to figure out where to bring it at CBC, because do you bring it to comedy? Do you bring it to documentary? I'm grateful that it wound up coming to us on the YA side, because it's a really exciting project. And it was announced not too long ago, but it's called For Heaven's Sake. And it's with CBS All Access in the US, which they're rebranding as Paramount Plus. And it's with us, with CBC Gem in Canada. And it's about a cold case, an 80+ year cold case, where one of the creators' great uncles went missing in Minden, Ontario, way back when, and it's an unsolved mystery. And they take it upon themselves to go off and try to solve this crime. Obviously, the odds are stacked against them, but there was something, again, really charming about it, but also the idea of just taking matters into your own hands and thinking about how to reach Gen Z and reach this audience that we're talking about. It just felt so compatible with that type of storytelling and with that type of motivation and what that audience would be thinking about right now. So we think it'll reach across all of the CBC sort of audience cohorts that we have, like old to young, but we just thought there was something really special about that too. And again, a really good firsthand sort of story. So one of those ones that you just sort of know right away. That's the kind of thing we should be supporting. So really excited about that one too.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Zach. And just for our viewers, we will be adding links to For Heaven's Sake, Next Stop, and the other show that
410.
That show into the comment section, so you could just check out the framing of the shows, and hopefully they'll help your pitches. So thank you, Zach.
Cool.
And then Rignum, any sort of stand-up pitches on your end?
Yeah, I'll name a few. So I'm going to give a few different examples from different creators that can kind of give you a range of their experience and their pitches. So first is a series from Sabrina Cruz, who's a popular YouTuber from Toronto, who just graduated undergrad, which is crazy because she's got like 300,000 subscribers. And she pitched us this series called How Did We Get Here? And it was for our Owning Our Identities lane. And she has experience doing explainers. You know, she knows the Vox style of explainer, which is very popular right now. And she's just explaining the different ways, the hidden histories behind everyday objects. So the first video, these are all unpublished. The first video is about mannequins and how they relate to our view of body image. Because mannequins weren't always framed the way that they are in current fashion houses and in stores. And the way that she pitched it to us was giving us all the episodes, you know, giving us the summaries, the tagline, the title of How Did We Get Here, and how it kind of tied in with the work that she's already been doing in this space. If you look at her YouTube channel, she gets hundreds of thousands of views on similar explainers. And so that was a for sure for us. And she's actually somebody that I was wanting to work with for a long time, but couldn't get a hold of her. And just the fact that the pandemic happened, she had time. So that's one. But not everybody needs to be an established YouTuber or have, you know, hundreds of thousands of followers. Another one that I found, I forget how I found her, but her name is Shabani Goalklee. She's an Indian Canadian journalist who pitched us a series called So You Want to Fix, and it's she was a lawyer in India, but she came to America, did her master's of journalism at Columbia, moved to Toronto or Vancouver after that. So she was leveraging her legal experience with her journalistic video experience, because she has been doing some video producing, and pitched us a series about, you know, how you can use the law to fix social issues in Canada and around the world. So, you know, the first episode is fixing wildfires. So she talks about the different legal means and you know, covenants and global treaties and even local government things that you can do to fix this issue of wildfires. So that really stood out to us. It was very clear. It was very specific. You know, it leveraged all of her background, and she had shown that she's been able to do certain similar videos like that in the past. Lastly, I'll talk about Kelly Kitagawa, who, you know, she's, you know, our relationships and the way that we find things, it can be really random sometimes. But I remember I spoke to Kelly initially probably 3 years ago. And at that time, she wasn't ready, I don't think. But she had developed her skills in that next 2 years to a point where it was definitely, it was a can't miss. She had started her own YouTube. She became a producer at Postable, which is the National Post YouTube channel that they had for a little bit. And, you know, she was showing that she was able to do these types of videos and make compelling content. And she came to us an idea called, came to us with an idea called Personal Politics. And it was for the Changing the System lane. And it was how you can change, you know, the politics around you, you know, how you can do it individually as a person and shape politics, you know, everyday politics around you, whether it's local government, whether it's the dinner table conversations, just the things that you can take individually to make a difference in your community and in the country. So again, another clear focus and really different take on a kind of issue of politics. And so her first video is how to call people in versus how to call people out. I think it's, you know, right now it's really relevant. I struggle with this all the time. We all do. And getting a how-to on this is really helpful. So that's just a little bit of an example of some of the pitches that we've greenlit recently.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So again, how did we get here? So you want to fix and personal politics? We'll have those links available for everybody who's watching right now.
Actually,
so moving along, because
yeah,
I want
they're all unpublished, but
oh, they're unpublished.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll have articles linking to just talking about those shows. So we'll just make sure that we'll have some information to provide the audience members. Okay, so moving right along, because I want to be able to get to audience questions. But Rignum and Zach, both of you spoke to this a little bit, but I'd love to get more in depth. What kind of content is the Creator Network and CBC GEMS YA Digital Originals looking for right now? What's trending right now? What's evergreen? So I know you both spoke to specific lanes, but maybe just something, maybe giving us an overview of evergreen content or trending content would be great.
Yeah, I can start with this one too. You know, I think we look at our numbers on GEM every week and, you know, see how things sort of ebb and flow through the ranker. And it's always interesting because some of the things that start strong start to slow down, and some things that start slow sort of pick up over time. So that's one thing I'll say just to preface this is, as far as like what's really working, I think that's an ongoing process of discovery as we figure out, you know, of the content that we're commissioning, what is really resonating with the audience that we're able to reach with GEM. So that's again, just sort of something I'll preface this with. But you know, I think there are a few series that it's the kinds of things that I was mentioning in the last question and answer that I was mentioning about good pitches, and you know, series like Next Stop, which got off to a roaring start. The 410 continues to do really well, and it's funny because, you know, the 410 is only 3 episodes. So if you were to multiply by the amount of episodes that most shows are, which is 6 to 8, then suddenly it's like, oh, that moves it up into a different territory in the ranker. Like, it's really not an apples to apples comparison. But it has been really successful. And anecdotally, we hear from a lot of people that say, oh, I love that show. And when is more coming out, and so on. So I think that's always a good sign. But we still consider ourselves a little bit in startup mode, you know, because of the pivot that I mentioned at the top of this panel, where historically, you know, we would have said, you know, bring us material that would be appropriate for millennials or, you know, young Gen Xers, like that sort of 25 to 40 zone. And I think, you know, again, GEM launches, everybody's programming for digital. What makes us different? I think we realize that 25 to 40 is squarely in the TV bracket. That's what our colleagues on the TV programming team are looking for in programming for prime time. So it really forced us to say, well, then, you know, what is it that we're doing differently? And hence the sort of startup mode that we found ourselves in. So right now, a lot of the work we're doing is development. And, you know, there are a few big anchor YA series currently up on the slate. So, or on the service, I should say. One would be Utopia Falls. And that's something that we regard as very much a tentpole for the younger end of YA. It's really right on that line between kids appropriate and YA appropriate. And for us, it sort of tips the scales into YA, and hence why our team oversaw it. It's a great example of, you know, the type of show that we would want to have in that first quadrant of YA. Like, you're getting a little too old for CBC Kids, you start looking around and so on. It's a tricky example because it's a 10-part 1-hour series, and we don't do a lot of those. Most of what we do is under 20 minutes per episode. That worked out with the nature of the financing that was already in place. So Hulu was attached, and Sonar had already put together a lot of that, Sonar production. So but it's a good example in terms of shows you could actually see on GEM. The 410, another great example. So we've spoken to that at length. I think on the older end, where we start getting into, you know, late teens, early 20s, you know, so this Friday we'll have a special from Kenny versus Spenny that comes out, and it'll be interesting to see how that audience responds to that. I mean, again, that's something that's going to appeal across the board. There's nostalgia for that show, but it is something that our team brought in, and there's a nice symmetry to it because that show was originally greenlit by the CBC youth team, 15 plus years ago. So I think it's going to be really fun to see how that young audience responds to it, because we know from social media that Kenny and Spenny have a very active young fan base. So we're still at the very early stages of shows actually materializing on Gem that represent our slate. And we're building around those anchors, and we're trying to see where can we really build up those pockets of audience. So hopefully, if we do this in a year, there will be a few more bits of empirical evidence that I can share and say, here's what's really working and here's what we want to build on. But yeah, relatively early days.
Okay, great. So we'll just have to invite you again next year.
Please do.
Also, I'm really looking forward to this Kenny versus Spenny reboot. I'm so curious because I'm pretty sure that's perfectly within my age range for when I was in my early teens. So,
Mine too.
Yeah. So I'll go to Rignum to ask about evergreen and trending topics. Also, I want to ask you that as well, but I'll just go to Rignum first.
Yeah, I mean, I think that right now specifically we're looking for evergreen content, and that would mean if you're talking about an issue, talking about that issue in an evergreen way, whether it's wildfires, that's a video that we can play every year. We can post that again when the wildfires eventually come back again. And if you're talking about political issues, looking at it not from a daily news lens, but from a looking at this particular issue kind of from a very higher vantage point, and being able to explain that concept and how it could change moving forward. I'm going to talk a little bit about how kind of COVID plays into this, because this is a big issue that we're dealing with, obviously, and I think a lot of people will have questions about it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you shoot in a COVID environment? It's an important question. It's something that we're trying to figure out. A lot of right now what we're doing is voiceover animation explainers, explainers with stock footage and historical archivals mixed with straight to camera vlogging style, trying to be creative in how we're creating it because of the conditions that we're in. It's really hard to send people out right now to go film because you don't know what's going to happen. So I'd say in this current moment, I would try to think about things that you can do, from your bedroom or virtually, whether you're doing a Skype interview with someone and then mixing that in with whatever video you have, or filming something outdoors with just yourself, and being really creative in how you're playing with all the footage. Because right now it's really hard to send people out to film and interview people in person, go meet them inside someone's house and whatnot. So that's probably going to be like that for the next at least 6 months, I would say. So
those are really great tips, Rignum. Thank you for bringing them up. I'm sure there's a lot of creators out there who are really interested in how you've been adapting or how they can adapt to this new environment. So that's a good segue into my question to you, Tay, which is, what kind of evergreen content have you pitched? And also, do you look at trending topics when you pitch stuff around urban planning, for example? Oh, you're muted, Yute.
We all have to mess up once on that, eh? And if you're lucky, you'll get another cameo from my mom walking across my background. Yeah, that's such a good question, Anita. And I really, I think there's always a balance, maybe. I think, of course, we'd love for content to be evergreen. That's, I think that's a really trendy word that people are throwing out these days. But, if we're realistic with ourselves, it also has to be relevant to some degree. And, obviously, going hyper into sort of the daily news cycle wouldn't be a wise sort of long-term strategy for content. But, there has to be some, for me anyways, a compelling pitch has to have some sort of grounding in the present moment that we feel like we're in. I really like the pitch that Rignum you brought up earlier on, a video about the difference between calling out versus calling in. And to me, that's obviously that is a conversation where it seems like we've been having quite often the last couple of years. And it seems like it'll be one that will be relevant for, at least for many years to come. And to me, that's like one that feels like, it really strikes that balance well. Pitches that I've given recently, I think there's a few videos that are being published right now that I did with the Creator Network, stuff that I called the non-essentials. With the pandemic, I'm just going to give you like the verbatim pitch. With the pandemic, we focused on the essentials, which is groceries, walking, toilet paper, tiger documentaries. This video series was really about the non-essentials, the stuff that we aren't doing anymore, like handshakes or clubbing or going to the office, right? The series was about going into like, why did we even do these things in the first place? And as we come out of the pandemic, will we want to do them anymore, right? Why did we ever shake hands? And moving forward, do we want to still shake hands? And to me, like when I think about your question, like I feel like that kind of gets close to striking that balance, right? It is like rooting us in the moment that we're in, this pandemic, these very weird, strange times or whatever people call them. And then while still posing questions and having a discussion that really, for me, feels like would, stand the test of time.
Mm-hmm. I would definitely watch those. I'm definitely going to be watching the handshake one and the clubbing one.
The handshakes and the clubbing ones are out right now, and they're amazing. I've watched them
great.
at least like 5 times each.
Oh, thank you.
I'm very excited. Also because clubbing is just like, so I feel like that died well before COVID, but maybe it's just because I'm old.
No, dude, that's actually part of the story. That's, I don't know how much you want. Okay, I won't get into the whole thing, but basically like clubs sort of started dying around the mid 2000s, and we can blame it on gentrification essentially. So wow. I'll leave you at that. Yeah. And then please check out the video.
Yeah, so that's great. So our team at Real Asian will be adding those links for y'all to check out because they sound really cool. And Yute, another follow-up question for you regarding COVID. How have you been adapting your shooting style and just like how you're gathering footage in light of the pandemic?
Mm-hmm. Thankfully for me, I tend to be quite solo when it comes to my production style. So I'm almost always filming by myself. Even the piece, the cameras that I film, it's like I set up the tripod in front of me and I kind of pray to God that it's in focus, relatively speaking, and then, just kind of go for it. But I will say it's definitely impacted or it's forced me to be quite creative in making decisions on what visuals would make the most sense for a story. Maybe in the past I might have relied a lot more heavily on going out to film something and even like focus the story on going to physical locations and maybe talking with people at those places. Now I'm definitely much more dependent on stock footage, on using graphics, animations. If anything, COVID has been a real it's really taught me to be a better animator and a better kind of, and certainly not saying that my animation is, amazing. I still do most of it on Premiere Pro, which astonishes some people. I've been told After Effects is the program to use. I don't know if, what the expert opinion would be on, but
there is that video with three Utes.
Oh,
that was pretty deep.
That was so difficult to say. Sorry, for context, I for this third video of the non-essentials, which is on offices, the intro scene is this 4-way Zoom call with 4 different Utes. Because clearly I don't have enough friends to have like separate actors and separate. Anyways, that took some time to set up. But once you break it down, it's fairly easy to get into. I would definitely recommend like online courses. Even you don't even have to go for some of the paid stuff, but YouTube has a lot of resources on how to animate basic things, and I think those skills will go a long way to helping you tell the story. At the end of the day, you have like so many different options. I mean, I think this experience has really taught me that you have so many different options when it comes to telling a story. And so, whereas in the past I might have instantly reached for my camera and gone out, taken transit, in a crowded, bus to go film a scene. Now I'm thinking, oh, like maybe it would make much better, sense to throw in some archival footage here, or talk about this with some graphics or a short animation.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Yute. So at this point, we're going to take a 5-minute break and then come back to so the panelists can take some audience questions. So thank you so much for staying with us so far. Okay, looks like we're back. Hope everybody got to to the washroom and grab a glass of water because we're going to take audience questions now. So the first one I'm going to pose to everybody is this. So, hi folks, I've been pitching animated series concepts around Toronto for the last few months. I'm wondering if there's much interest in animation at CBC, speaking of, UT's reference earlier before the break, and how one might best approach you with these sorts of projects. So is CBC looking for animated projects? And if so, how should the pitches be framed? Oh, muted.
I could speak to our perspective on that, and I think from the YA perspective, we're totally open to it. I think as far as the programming units go, we might be one of the few that you might want to bring an animated series to. CBC Kids would also, of course, look at animated, but we're really interested in it. I think one of the obstacles for us has always been price point. So with digital originals, the budgets, we haven't gotten too much into this yet, but the budgets are lower than they tend to be on the TV side. So, we have to think, if we were to develop an animated series, would we be the best partner to help bring it to life? And I think, if you look at GEM right now, there's a series called Winston Roundtree's People Watching that had 2 seasons, both of which are up. And that was one that was funded through the Canadian sort of digital and web series funding system. So, and I can't remember all of the funds now. I know IPF was involved. CMF's linear digital series was involved. So that is one way to go. And then I think if you look at a series like Gary and His Demons, which is, just that much bigger a production, it's another one that we love, but that one had a partner in the US that helped get that show financed and made. And it's tough to see how we could have done that one without a partner of that size, because it's just that much bigger. So we're always open to it, and it's a great way to reach the audience that we're talking about. So it again, like anything, it starts with the creative and feeling like, okay, this is something that we think will connect with this audience, and then it's okay, pragmatically, is there a way for us to support this thing and making it all the way through to production? And those questions come second. And the first series I mentioned, just in case I said it quickly, it's called Winston Roundtree's People Watching. And it's up on GEM. And so is Gary and His Demons. And, candidly, there is more in development on our side. It's just a matter of, once it's done development, how do we help get this financed and produced? And we'll do what we can, but depending on the scale, it can be challenging.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zach.
Yeah, for us, we're definitely open to animation. However, our budgets are even smaller than Zach's, and we're in the factual, documentary, unscripted space. So they would have to be animations that are, based in nonfiction. So no scripted animations like TV shows that you think of, but think of more like TED Ed animations for YouTube, or Crash Course, or things like that, kind of like Vox animations. But we're open to that, and I know a lot of people love to do those too.
Okay, perfect. We'll make sure we'll get links up to those examples you mentioned, TED Ed and Vox, as kind of templates that people can follow along to. So we'll make sure those links are available. Okay, great. So I have more specific questions to you, Zach and Rignum. So Zach, specifically to you, what percentage of projects do you fund? And what's the timeline on how long these things move through production?
I don't think we've crunched the numbers on the ratio of sort of pitches to projects that we support. It is, the last time we did a tally, I think it might have been about 1,000 projects pitched in a year. And, maybe we develop 20 to 30 of those, and maybe 10 to 15 of them make it onto screen. Maybe, that's probably not wildly off. It's also certainly not scientific, but maybe not a bad way, even just in terms of setting expectations of how much our team is looking at. And again, the ratio of which some projects make it through to different stages of development and eventually production. Sorry, there was a part B of that question, right?
Yeah. Part 2 is what's the timeline on how long it takes to move things through production?
Yeah, it's all relative. I think we've seen some pitches come in the door with scripts fully finished and in really good shape, and suddenly it's like, oh well, normally our instinct would be to do a bit of development together, but we don't really need to, and they're already kind of ready to go. And maybe it's a bit of support as the project ramps up for production, but it doesn't have to be a traditional development phase. So in that sense, our position would be this project is ready to go into production, so we can skip the development and the creative part of the sort of preparing it for a production stage and just start talking about financing, like how can we help get this financed, which I don't want to go too far off course, and I wonder if we should save that for another question if you want me to get into financing.
Yeah, maybe we should pause because I want to make sure I get through everybody's questions first, but that is definitely important. So we'll circle back.
So we'll save that. And then just to say, that process can take 6 months to a year, just getting the financing together to get the thing made, and then actually mounting the production and everything could be another 6 months. So totally depends on the show, but it could be, let's say we greenlight something today. Mm-hmm. I think we're mentally probably putting it somewhere on the schedule in late 2021, but probably 2022, which is absurd to say, but probably true.
Okay, That's great. That's very helpful. Yeah. Thank you. Rignum, a specific question for you. Does CBC Creator Network respond to all pitches or just successful ones? And then the second part of that is, as well, after submitting a pitch, what does the timeline look like for getting a response and development deal? So that's similar to Zach, but just first of all, do you respond to all pitches or just only successful ones?
So we have a small team, and we get a lot of pitches. So we do try to respond at least to everyone. We want to be able to do that. Sometimes we might not be able to respond, but we do try our best to respond to every pitch, and then also give feedback in terms of where you're kind of missing, where you need to go, how you need to frame it. So we do want to be able to handhold a little bit, give feedback, which we do. And then also, if your pitch right off the bat is really great, then we'll jump on a call. We'll talk about it a little bit, where you need to refine it, and where you can do better. So that's kind of the process there. It really is ad hoc. We don't really have a nailed down system because we are so new, and because sometimes of the volume of the pitches that we get. But we try to give as much feedback as possible because we're not only in the content business, we want to be developing and mentoring, as much as we can, the next generation. And in terms of timelines, it can vary. It can vary from, 2 weeks to a month to 2 months. Sometimes if a pitch is amazing and really clear, we can greenlight it in the next week or two. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to refine it. The producers have to go back to the drawing board, reframe it, repitch again. So it can vary based on the quality of the pitch and the quality of the creator. How ready their resume is. We will take a look at their videos, what their quality is, and if we think that's it meets our standards. And so it does vary. And I think that was all the questions.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so Ute, you have a specific question for you. So the question is, can you talk about some things you picked up or learned when working with the CBC that emerging creators should be mindful of?
Gosh, I'm pausing because I where do we even begin? I mean, to give you a sense of what Rignum was, who Rignum was sort of working with at the beginning. I mean, I essentially was making videos just as a hobby and as an interest, and I think there's just so much of a jump that's to be made from making videos as sort of your side gig, something just off the side of your desk, to actually thinking concretely about budgeting and making sure your video is that the time you're putting into these projects is budgeted well for. I think so. With that in mind, I think maybe the first sort of thing I've learned from working with Rignum and the CBC Creator Network is understanding like the budgeting that goes on behind video. Once it stops becoming a passion project, and once the timeline stops becoming infinite, and you kind of realize that there are all those small decisions around filming locations and length of script and around fancy effects you want to add on in your editing. They add up, and they add up in your time and ultimately in your budget. So that's like one thing for sure. One key lesson I've taken away, not so much from the video end of things, but it was really with CBC Radio. A very cool part of this partnership for me has been the chance to work with CBC Vancouver's Early Edition show, which is like the morning radio show out here, as well as the digital CBC Digital sort of web article producers. I don't know what the official terms are for that group, but essentially they've really helped me just be so much more economical with my writing. I think the original videos I used to write were, I would just go on and on. I just realized there were so many things that I could just cut out while not like losing parts of the story. And so I think that I feel like that's the lesson that I could just like share universally with anyone if I could, is just really taking the time to go over and over and over and over your writing, and having other people take a look at it for you and edit it for you too. Not having a lot of ego around it really helps. And I think at any time you enter any sort of creative industry where you have to work with other people, you'll inevitably learn that you can't be too precious about the creative product as well. So those are maybe I'll say those two things. Sort of knowing the work it takes to take more of like a passion project to like an actual predictable consistent product or like a video, and then learning how to really be economical with your words. At the end of the day, how to tell a good story, right? Don't bore people and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I'll just add a little bit there. Because we work with not only seasoned producers but also really green ones, it varies for us so much. And so we've had times where we've had to help creators fill out an invoice or how to create an invoice. We've had people, a lot of it is in the budget and financing and the paperwork side of things, because most creatives don't have that experience, especially if they haven't been doing professionally. So just trying to hone those skills, and I would say also learn how to work with a big broadcaster or a media company. That's a big jump, and there's a big jump in professionalism and paperwork and bureaucracy, in relationship managing. We've had creators invoice us for a video they just finished and then email us in an hour and be like, oh, we haven't got paid yet. And then and we're like, oh, well, it doesn't work that way. We have a whole office that has to process all these things and things like that. So it really can vary based on your experience.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Rigna. Oh, Zach.
If you don't mind me quickly jumping in.
Yeah,
sorry, Zach.
No, just go for it, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, I was gonna, maybe, totally, like, to tag on to Rignum's thing, I'd say don't be afraid of entering the bureaucracy. It's it's scary, but ultimately very rewarding. And I think for me, it's someone that's very used to working just by myself and just for myself. Like it's been very important to learn how to work with other people and be vulnerable actually with other people. I think I'll be completely honest with you. Like I'm still working on the more professionalism side of my work, being consistent with my work and really understanding it and how to make it much more predictable of a process. And for me, I've personally found that it's in embracing some amount of structure, and yes, sometimes a little bit of bureaucracy that really helps add a lot more consistency and sort of professionalism to your work. Hopefully.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And actually, all of you guys brought up a really interesting point that I want to follow up on, which is, and particularly with Zach and Rignum, because Rignum, you mentioned that you do work with kind of emerging creators as well. Do you accept pitches based on potential, the creator's potential? Like if you see, okay, this person could really be going places with a little bit of mentorship, is that something that you consider?
All the time on our side. Yeah, absolutely. It's just like that would never be, sorry, I'm hearing a bit of an echo. Like if we see a pitch that we love and that, again, creatively satisfies everything that we're looking for, but it still needs mentorship, or we'd want to have them work with a production company with a bit more experience, that certainly wouldn't be an obstacle from our perspective. That would just be the next part of the conversation is, we love this. We think you'd benefit from building out your team a little bit, and here's where we think the support would be useful. We have those conversations all the time.
And Rignum?
Yeah, same thing here. If we see, some of their work and we see that it is raw, but there's a certain distinct voice or tone to it that's really appealing, that's different from what we have seen. We will definitely work with them, and we'll pair them up with with a shooter or an editor or a researcher, or they can pair up with themselves. And we try to build out, we usually more have skeleton teams, but we'll try and build out a smaller team for them to be able to shore up any weaknesses they have. And also just constantly try and give feedback. I've had one creator, Praj, who I actually met at Real Asian last year. So last year I met him at Real Asian, and he just got greenlit like 2 weeks ago on his first idea with us.
Oh, nice.
And he's been pitching us since last year. So he's been really persistent. He's like 20, I think, and he's persistent, but in a good way, and really taking feedback and workshopping it. So finally, we're able to work with him.
That's fantastic. So there you have it, folks. If you watch this panel, you will be greenlit for a series with CBC.
I didn't say that.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That's not true.
Bombard Rignum with email.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay, so that's good. This is why we're all here, to learn about this stuff. So another general question for all of you. Are overseas projects off the table for pitching now with the whole COVID pandemic?
I mean, not from our perspective. I wouldn't say anything. This is just like a general good answer and a good opportunity to give it, I think, but just nothing's ever off the table with us. Like, let's have the conversation. And, that's a production consideration that would probably be arrived at a little bit down the road. So it always starts with creative. I also want to lump another thing in there that we hear a lot, which was like the idea that things might have to be sanitized before they come to us, also absolutely not the case. Like, we want to see the truest vision of this thing that you're trying to put together. And you shouldn't worry about, if you're bringing that to CBC, that it has to be somehow tamer or something. If you go deep on GEM and see some of the stuff we've been doing, I mean, I think risks are being taken and challenging subject matter is being put out there. And that's going to be important for us to continue to grow and tell stories that people respond to. So across the board, if there's something you want to share with us and you think some of the stuff we're talking about today resonates, let's just have the conversation, and all of that can come next.
Okay, great. Yeah. Anything to add?
I think that's a great point. For us, we want to do things that CBC doesn't do. If the video looks, we don't want it to look like a CBC video. So we're trying to build something that CBC is missing. So, and sometimes people will pitch us or send us a video on a first cut, and it'll be really almost like they'll say, "Oh, I thought that's what you wanted," but it just doesn't come off that way. We want people to be themselves and talk like themselves, and not try to talk like a CBC reporter or create a CBC documentary. What they think is a CBC documentary. So that's one thing, that a big thing that we need to get out of creators' heads. And for overseas, we don't normally do overseas stuff because our budgets are so small. And um, we would pay for travel, within provinces usually, and maybe sometimes somewhere in Canada, but no travel for us right now, I would say, just because of the situation. You can do things based off of Zoom if you need to interview someone in a different part of the world. Um, and also, we get people to be creative now in terms of, like, if you want to shoot somebody there, maybe we can try to get that person you're trying to shoot there to vlog themselves on their phone, and then you teach them how to do that so that we can be creative in how we're doing it, and also looks cool too. And if you want to travel for us, like, there needs to be a clear reason for why you're traveling and why you can't do it otherwise.
Okay, great. Those are all fantastic points. Zach, were you going to say something else because you unmuted?
Oh, I think I forgot to remute, so no, I'm good.
Okay,
I'm good.
fine. No, I just wanted to say that was a really valuable point that you brought up about not making content creators avoiding, making content that they think has a CBC energy or a vibe to it. I think that's very valuable because that's actually a misconception I had as well. So one of the last questions that we'll be tackling is also open to everybody as well. The question is, can you talk a bit about who the product belongs to, even just a basic orientation? For example, what happens if it's a property you want to expand on? So who does the product or the content ultimately belong to?
I can begin. I don't know, Regnum, if we have different answers to this. I know that on our side, it's almost always a license. So CBC licenses the content from the producer. We have the rights to that content in Canada for a period of time. Sometimes it's outside of Canada too. It's sort of a negotiation that you'll make depending on other financiers when you're putting the deal together, and just depending on the amount of money that CBC is putting in versus other parties and versus yourself as a producer. So no two are exactly alike, but I would say very broad strokes. It's a license arrangement where we are licensing that right to play your content on our services. And then there's lots of little details going down from there.
For us, can you hear me? Okay, for us, we have two different ways. So we have a freelance model, in-house, and then independent producer. So for in-house productions, which are usually smaller, CBC owns the content. The budgets aren't as big, and it's just for smaller scale series and videos. And then there's the independent producers route, which is generally, I think what Zach and their team go down for bigger projects. We're licensing for a certain amount of years, and CBC does not own it. But then for in-house, CBC takes care of the legal, the insurance, E&O insurance, and the rights side of things. Whereas for independent production, that is not owned by CBC, the creator has to take care of legal. They have to have a lawyer. They have to take care of insurance. So it really is, it's a cost benefit analysis.
Okay, great. So it looks like we have time for one last question. So I would love to hear from all three of you about the kinds of budgets that creators can expect to get from CBC for your specific areas. And just even if there's a ballpark or if it's a range, that would be helpful.
Go ahead, Utay.
I can go ahead and start. I think when I was beginning out at the CBC Creator Network, as Rignan was saying, the budgets aren't huge to begin with, obviously, because they're really focusing on smaller pieces of content that they can just acquire quickly. So generally, my window of budget was around $2,000, and these days, with some flexibility, up to 3,000 is what I've sort of personally worked with. But curious to hear what the opinion is in-house.
Zach?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty standard for from our side of things. it depends as well on your experience as well. And then if you want to get into higher budget independent producers, then which we haven't done yet, I don't know what the range is, but it's higher than 3,000 per video. And the videos are usually like 5 to 8 minutes long, so they're not very long.
Yeah, we tend to think about it on the YA/Gem original side as more like the cost for the entire season. And such a range. This is a tough one because I don't know how helpful I can be, but I could say that, our license, we start with what do you need to make this thing? And then we have, a license fee that we'll be able to put towards it that will usually be comparable to what you would get from something like Bell Fund or IPF or Ontario Creates or CMF Linear Digital Fund. And if you look up those funds, they're generally somewhere between like 100K and 200K, give or take, depends on the fund. So in a best case scenario, maybe you go in with an ambitious plan that stacks all of those, and your dream budget is 7 to 8 to 900K. That's pretty high, and it has happened. But more often, it's you go in with a plan to hit all of those. Maybe you get one, maybe you get two, and then it's sort of not back to the drawing board, but it's a little bit like, can we do this show with our plan B financing scenario? And you'll work with our business and rights team on figuring that out. And they're amazingly supportive and user friendly and have the same interests in mind. Just let's try to get this thing made. So again, that's a tiny summary of how that works, but it might give you an idea of the scale. Something again like Utopia Falls, some of the bigger series, totally separate from this. This is more about shorter format, 20 minutes or less, 6 to 8 episodes total, something like that. That's the ballpark.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all. So this has been a really fruitful and productive conversation, and I'm sad that it has to end now, but hopefully all of you sitting at home watching this found it really valuable. Now I'm going to throw it to Real Asians Industry Education and Education Program, Jasmine Gui. So take it over, Jasmine.
Hi, thank you so much for all your insight. I think our panel, our audiences definitely found this really useful. We hope to continue the conversation on our film forum, actually. So we'll probably, share these resources that you've been seeing, audiences, on our Discord as well. And if you aren't on our Discord yet, highly recommend that you get on that. So again, I want to thank Anita, Rignam, Zach, and Mite for today's conversation. Thank you to Anissa and Christopher from Toronto Sign Language Interpreter Services. And for our backend support, thank you Atif, Mimi, and Joe. Just a reminder that Real Asian is still going on till November 19th. An update that, or just a disclaimer that our ticketing will end tomorrow, end of day tomorrow. This is to ensure that you get a 48-hour window to watch whatever it is that you have bought a ticket for. So the festival ends on November 19th, but ticket sales end tomorrow. So just keep that in mind if you're looking to buy more tickets. And you can find all this information at realasian.com/festival. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you take care and have a good rest of the week. Bye, everyone.